I believe that most of us don't think that we're doing maybe a whole lot of good for the world, but we also don't think we're hurting it either. Nobody likes to think that they're making the world a worse place. But looking at my own life and looking at the world around me recently, I've been forced to reconsider that and forced to kind of think that maybe I am actually making the world a worse place. I call it the net sum problem in my own head just because I think of things, mathematically or whatever. But, you look at society and most people tend to think, I believe, that by doing a good deed, it somehow kind of offsets or counterbalances a bad deed. Somebody who's volunteering their time tends to believe that it's going to offset the negative things in the world in some positive way. If we didn't believe that good deeds somehow counterbalanced or offset bad deeds, then there would be no point in doing them in the first place. So that being said, how much good are each of us actually doing in our lives? I've looked at my own life recently and I've kind of had to reconsider that. I am a taker when it comes right down to it. My whole life, my entire advantage in the world is based upon taking. I have student loans out the ears, but really when you look at that, I'm taking that money from one wealthy person and I'm going to pay it back with interest. I'm going to make that wealthy person wealthier. And that money that I pay back to him after I finish my education has to come from somewhere. Presumably, I'll find a job at some different company. I will essentially perpetuate a consumer economy where I will funnel money from somebody who is presumably perhaps of lower opportunities than myself back up to the person who is rich and paying him with interest. Ultimately, I'm perpetuating this cycle of taking money from the poor to give to the rich and widening the economic divide. And that is my fault. Ultimately, I can't blame anybody but myself. I can say that society, society says I have to become rich, I have to do this and that the best way to do that is get an education, blah, blah, blah. But the fact of the matter is I'm perpetuating it. I'm taking money from poor people to give to richer people, ultimately. So, my question for myself is, am I really having a negative impact upon the world? And I look around me at the room right now, and I have to say, yeah, I see books, I see, guitar, I see electronic gadgets, the computer in front of me. It's all hoarding. It's all me taking stuff to become mine. I'm doing negative good for the world. I can try to consider myself as a good person. I think I'm a relatively good person, but ultimately, do I help in a whole lot of ways? No, not a whole lot. I don't volunteer my time all that often. I really don't do a whole lot to offset this negative effect I'm largely having on the world. So we are on the wrong end of the net sum problem. If we want society to improve, if we want the world to improve, we need to do markedly good things for the world. But the problem is nobody, I don't believe, does anything just out of pure charity for anybody else, or if they do, it's a very, very rare deed. So really we need to fundamentally change the philosophy of society so that it becomes in our own best interests to balance this equation, to make the net sum be at least zero, so that the good deeds outweigh or at least balance the bad deeds. Because as it stands, we are rewarded for negative impact upon the world. We are rewarded for taking from people who are less advantaged so that we can improve our own advantage in the world. So my question for you is, how can we change this? How can we change it so that society rewards us for doing positive deeds rather than negative deeds? And perhaps just importantly, can we change this? Is it just the food chain? Is it just the hierarchy of society that a wealthy person takes money from the slightly less wealthy, takes money from the less wealthy, takes money from the less wealthy, takes money from the poor starving farmer who can't feed his family? Is that the nature of humanity? Are we so evil? Are we so corrupt that is how we function? That the wealthy feed on the poor?